among the first American scientists to study the effects of dioxin in Vietnam, with Harvard professor Matthew Messelson.
And that's a perfectly fair statement.
We asked him, is there proof that dioxin causes birth defects?
In animals, there are certainly fetal effects on reproduction and abnormal births, part of the toxicity. The actual demonstration of these in people has been more difficult.
The high doses of dioxin which caused birth defects in laboratory animals could not be tested on humans. And so scientists have struggled with proving the effect of this toxic chemical on the pregnancies of exposed women.
And the very interesting study, the very large study involving some 4,000 women in the north, started by Dr. Ton That Tung, did show that unexposed women, because none of the women in the north were sprayed, had more trouble with their pregnancies if they married men who had served in the south.
Thì đẻ ra con này nó rất là dị dạng. Trông bà xã tôi bà ấy còn không nhận, bà ấy bảo không phải con bà ấy, nhưng bác sĩ bảo đây là con của cô rồi. Sinh như cái con bé này người nó toàn lông. Cái lông nó mọc lông rất là nhiều. Thế mà nó lại trông nó dị dạng, trông mặt mũi nó trông nó dị dạng lắm. Bác sĩ thì bác sau khi mà đẻ đến cái con Thúy, cái Nga con thứ hai đấy, thì bác sĩ mới hỏi tôi là trước anh có đi bộ đội không? Thì tôi nói là có đi bộ đội, tôi ở quân khu 5. Thế thì bác bảo thế thôi anh không nên đẻ nữa.
Tôi gặp vợ, tôi gặp hai con của ông, tôi về gia đình vợ của ông ở đó. Thì ông là đúng là bệnh lý đúng như thế. Và dĩ nhiên là tôi sẽ nói riêng trường hợp của ông con, tức là rõ ràng là cái đấy là do hậu quả. Nhưng bây giờ những chuyện riêng người ta giấu vợ, bây giờ người ta có một người vợ trước, để đẻ ra đứa con cũng quái thai. Mà ông ấy giấu người thứ hai, tại vì sao? Sau đó bà sợ quá, bà ly dị. Ông mới lấy người này. Nhưng ông không nói thật cái điều đấy với bà này, bởi vì trước khi lấy. Thế bà này ra thì hai đứa con như vậy. Cho nên là cái đấy rõ ràng là ông lấy người vợ nào thì đều có vấn đề cả, con có vấn đề cả.
Sau khi đẻ các cháu nó tàn tật như vậy nghe chưa? Thì nói thật lúc bây giờ chưa ai hiểu được nó là xuất phát từ cái chất độc da cam.
Cười sặc.
Hàng xóm láng giềng nên người ta cũng nghĩ mình là ở Việt Nam mình có cái câu gọi là đời cha ăn mặn đời con khát nước. Thì người ta cứ nói như vậy. Chính vì vậy mà cái tâm lý của vợ chồng tôi nó rất là khủng hoảng. Đấy. Thế các cụ thì không hiểu gì cả, các cụ cứ đi cúng bái, đến chùa chiền cúng bái để cầu khấn.
Des millions de Vietnamiens victimes de cet épandage qui ont souffert.
The audience was captivated by Dr. Nguyen Thi Ngoc Phung's research linking Agent Orange and birth defects.
Comme nous avons vu, jusqu'à présent, n'ont reçu.
She conducted her study at the largest gynecological hospital in southern Vietnam.
I have been working in Teaching Hospital for more than 35 years. And during the years of 60s, especially after 65, I have witnessed many cases of deformed babies born in the hospital, as well as many cases of cancer of the uterus. So I thought how to link the spraying of the toxic chemicals with the outcome of pregnancy. So we conducted some case control study in the hospital on the women coming to the hospital with abnormal pregnancy and the other women giving birth to normal baby as a control group. And then we compare the rate of exposure to Agent Orange or to the other toxic chemicals during wartime. And we found out that the difference is very very high, big.
We asked Dr. Fung if the chemical companies agreed to provide compensation for the victims of Agent Orange, what would she ask for?
I would use the money to buy ultrasound machine for the district where the spraying was heavily done during wartime. So I will recognize the high-risk people to detect very early if they have birth defects and the congenital malformations of the fetus inside of the uterus.
On March 11, 2005, the federal court in Brooklyn dismissed the Vietnamese class action lawsuit. The judge ruled that in the 1960s, when herbicides were used to defoliate the jungles in South Vietnam, they were not considered chemical weapons.
The main precedent that Judge Weinstein is relying on for our case is the Zyklon B case, because that's a case in which a company, a supplier of poison gas, was held responsible in a court of law for knowingly supplying poison gas which was used to kill people. Now clearly the Zyklon B case is a much more egregious case. It was a case in which concentration camp inmates were slaughtered by heavy use of Zyklon B, which originally has legitimate use as a pesticide. It's to kill lice. And it's important to remember that the defendants in the Zyklon B case were executed. They were sentenced to death for their actions.
Now, have there been, someone said there was news from Brooklyn? No.
Dismissed. 233-page decision.
I mean, during only two weeks only, he has written 233 pages.
I think he started writing before 2 weeks ago.
I think so.
Yes.
Curious that it comes just on the day that the conference here starts. It's sort of a macabre Greek quality to that.
It's a very technical question. The question is not whether it's a good idea to have corporate responsibility, but under the law that the Supreme Court laid down, the question is whether in the 1960s international law recognized corporate liability. And it's pretty clear that while we might think it would be better to have rules that allow that, that was not international law in the 1960s and therefore wouldn't be available today.
Even though the Vietnamese government sent a large delegation to the Paris conference, they were not officially engaged in the class action lawsuit. And they are not likely to be, because there is too much at stake, with trade agreements and a fragile new friendship to cultivate.
Dès le début, nous réalisons que c'est une lutte difficile, parce que le chemin de la recherche pour la justice n'est jamais facile, surtout avec les États-Unis. Alors, ce qui est arrivé, je pense que nous attendons à cela, mais cela ne peut nous arrêter dans notre activité pour rendre justice aux victimes du bruit orange. Nous allons continuer le combat jusqu'au bout.
Activists from Vietnam, Europe, and the United States rallied at the conference. They called for support for an international campaign to help the victims.
The result of the lawsuit was a setback, not a defeat. For the sake of the children that we've seen, we have to mobilize still more, still stronger, until victory is achieved.
The U.S. has a moral responsibility to address the consequences of Agent Orange. I believe, I may be very optimistic, but once more efforts are made, concentrated efforts working with the various groups across the world to build an truly international coordinated campaign, that we will have success.
After 30 years, the U.S. government is beginning to show signs of cooperating with the Vietnamese. Mrs. Hong's hometown, Ben Hoa, is near one of the former U.S. military bases that is heavily contaminated. 3 of these bases have been identified by the Vietnamese as hotspots and chosen for detoxification. It is a first step, but cleaning the environment and caring for the millions of victims will take massive resources. For now, the Vietnamese are struggling on their own, with some help from the international community. Dr. Phan Thi Phi Phi is raising money for a hospital for disabled children in her hometown. At the same time, she continues as an advisor for the National Dioxin Project. At the Paris conference, the scientists and activists joined forces to stress the need for medical help for the Vietnamese.
I think that at the moment there are sufficient resources to do both, the scientific and the humanitarian aspect. First and foremost is to get needed treatment to sick people, regardless of how they're sick. I think that the humanitarian aspect can be generously approached and what can be done. Some of these severely injured children, severely deformed children, custodial care is about all that you can offer, but a lot of others can be rehabilitated one way and another. And I would put that as the absolute top priority.
Near Hanoi, the Friendship Village was founded by a U.S.-Vietnam veteran, George Mizo. He was joined by veterans from Canada and Australia, as well as European and Japanese activists. It is dedicated to the care and rehabilitation of children with birth defects allegedly caused by Agent Orange. Vietnam veterans also joined the international campaign. As part of a coalition of American peace groups, they brought several Vietnamese victims on a speaking tour of 10 American cities. The victims told their war stories in order to raise awareness and gather support for their fight for justice.
Filing that case was a major wake-up call to all of us in the world and in the U.S. to say, these people are fighting for justice and we need to support their struggle. And there's an international movement to support the struggle of Vietnamese people for justice for the Agent Orange injuries that they suffer. People in Britain started an international petition, which we're hoping to get 1 million signatures on in the US. And if you look at this brochure that you find on the table, you'll be able to pick this up and sign on to the petition and get your friends to do so.
I'm here as a Vietnam vet who has dealt with the Agent Orange through some cancer. And this is Mr. Hai. Mr. Hai is the man who was the truck driver who was coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and being drenched with Agent Orange for probably 10 years.
Và hiện nay tôi còn lại 3 người con, thì 2 người mắc bệnh câm điếc và 1 người thì bị tâm thần. khi tôi bị nhiễm chất độc ở trong chiến trường.
Mr. High and I need to talk. He has prostate cancer, and I want to talk to him about that. I want to connect with him. So last night, after I introduced an experience, I just put my arm around him, and we just stayed like that for a while. So we have connected at a very nice, level, very real level.
In May 2006, Pham Thi Hoi's son, Voi Quang Ki, died as a result of the spina bifida linked to his mother's exposure to the herbicides. Three months later, Michael Ryan's daughter Carrie died from complications of her many birth defects linked to his exposure to Agent Orange. What is at stake here are future generations of children and their right to live lives free of the ghosts of war.